This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Stay tuned to find out more.
What you could have said, and this is just my advice, because I have been in that situation before with friends, where being open to having the dialogue is always the best path, because you don't want to leave, which you've done, I don't know how many times, but because I'm not a part of your personal life, but that's just burning bridges with people who could be your ambassadors.
I treat people bad that care about me.
Yes.
That's Peter's sentiment.
You heard that. That is, I feel very strongly about that. And you're not the only person I know like that. You push people away, the people who really love you.
Ever since his hip-hop career drew to a close, Joe Budden took what many would see as a full stop and found the beginning of a new chapter. First, he took on the role of hip-hop's disgruntled elder statesman on Everyday Struggle. Then, when Complex refused to grant his demands for a lengthy contract or a hefty percentage, Joe consolidated his efforts into his own show. Once known as I'll Name This Podcast Later, the Joe Budden Podcast made its name as a safe haven for audiences that wanted to escape from mainstream media narratives, delivering hot takes and courting controversy along the way. With the big scoops offset by the camaraderie between Joe and the core team of Rory and Mal and longtime engineer Parks, Budden positioned himself as a beacon of truth, shining a light on a shadowy industry. But after years spent making his name on a platform of transparency, cracks are beginning to show in what is actually behind the Joe Budden Podcast Network as we know it.
You know, last week was a tough pod. Well, the week before that, we've been working through things.
Yeah.
What I'm learning as I go about this podcast network business is, as I continue to ascend and as we continue to ascend, it's harder for people to talk to me. So that's my reaction when I see the fans attempt to split up something that was built so carefully over the years. Give everybody time to chill, get back to their respective corners, figure out what they want to do, how they want to go about doing it.
Since the show really began to pick up steam in 2018, Rory and Mal have been key to the pH balance, serving as the coolant to Joe's fire and occasionally challenging him with new perspectives. But in the wake of their relationship beginning to crumble, some audiences are now reappraising their shared history and pinpointing moments of tension along the way. And what's more, a lot of Joe's critics and peers will be feeling vindicated when you consider that Joe being blamed for the podcast's fate is in keeping with trends that they've pointed out over the years. Most notably, Budden's ability to let emotion trespass into areas where the business should come first. For the summary of this argument, look no further than Charlamagne the God's words after the Spotify deal came apart at the seams.
It sounds to me like Joe Budden is a person who knows his worth, but doesn't know how to properly negotiate it. Because if you keep doing deals with various corporations and you keep getting trash deals, that's on you. Like things like vacation days, bonuses, all of that has to be negotiated in your contract from the beginning. If you keep having the same issues with various companies because it was the same thing at Complex, it's probably not them, it's probably you, Joe.
In response to his on-again, off-again nemesis claims, Joe did what he always did by airing it out on the podcast. Along the way, he slandered Charlamagne for partnering up with iHeart, only to then sign a starkly similar deal with Patreon that dubbed him head of creator equity. At the time, Joe deciding to ink a contract with the world's largest subscription service for independent artists seemed to make perfect sense. After all, it's a move that aligned with a value system that's always argued against the overstated position that major labels and corporate entities hold in the careers of those who create. But upon reflection, it seems that signing on the dotted line with Patreon could have been the spark that caused the infighting to spiral out of control. While Joe beamed about the new deal in episode 412, Rory and Mal awkwardly shuffled in their seats, contributing nothing in terms of words, but telling all when it came to the energy. As a result, news of the crew reaching a breaking point has led moments of unrest that had previously been viewed as friendly bantering to take on a different note. Most notably, this exchange from their last episode as the classic quartet.
Sometimes you gotta fight your friends though, man.
I would not.
Who the said we was friends?
So I want to take a quick break to thank our friends at Skillshare, a unique service that enables creatives to turn their dreams into reality, taking the knowledge and the know-how to the general public. Skillshare offers thousands of classes that'll provide you with the tools to make headway with your chosen craft, whether it be learning how to rap, make beats, or edit music videos. Skillshare's got you covered. In fact, we leveled up by finding out how to mix this video's music with the legend Young Guru, responsible for sculpting the sound of some of Jay-Z's most legendary tracks. The famed engineer makes the secret to the pros more accessible than ever before. So what are you waiting for? Skillshare works out to be less than $10 a month with an annual membership. However, the first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership and access to their massive learning library. Head over to Skillshare and start your journey now. Seemingly drifting apart in real time, the exact cause of the friction remains undisclosed for the moment. But if it turned out to be a dispute revolving around business, a lot of people wouldn't be surprised if Rory and Mal happened to feel a little shortchanged. Least of all, DJ Academics, who's been planting the seed that the two aren't making the sort of money that you'd anticipate someone on a hugely successful podcast would.
It should be very evident in what I've built, because them bum ass are struggling. Facts. I'm gonna be all right. You know, I like what Joe did. Joe making millions. He don't care. Them is living from check to check. Them is really down bad. That was never me.
Although it was said in the context of beef, Axe comments could have some validity when you consider that while Joe was jubilant about signing with Patreon, his co-host didn't seem as enthusiastic. After all, Joe Budden is not renowned for his businessman acumen. And when you consider that he admitted to turning down a blank check from Triller and lining the pockets of the core team that paved the way for it in favor of doing what benefited the health of the network as a whole, they have every right to be aggravated. As rather than consulting his co-hosts, Joe opted to rebuff it without their knowledge. And what's more, it's not the first time he's decided to refrain from making everyone in his circle millionaires due to his reservations.
It don't really mean nothing to me to say no to the $10 million deal because I've never had $10 million.
Right.
I have zero idea what I'm missing when I don't close the $10 million deal. That's a ballsy move. I'm a great poker player. Everybody's not.
When Swiss Beats sold Versus to the same company and gave equity to those that made the series into the runaway success that it was, Joe prioritized keeping his network on his own terms in a way that it could be seen as either admirable or self-serving. As while Joe may have no idea what he's missing out on from a big money deal, perhaps some of the other members on the team do. In spite of his insistence that creators should be fairly compensated, there's always been a weariness over the direction that he's wanted to take the podcast in that has occasionally popped up in the background. And when hot-headed disputes, such as these have been raging since episode 175 of the show, it's a miracle that this didn't happen sooner.
There was a point during the podcast, I think y'all thought I was trying to keep us from the bag.
The three of us was just not on the same page. I think we skipped a week. If viewers can go back, that was because the three of us were screaming at each other in the face in the parking lot of the old spot.
Creators, gotta get by the creative differences.
Sure enough, they did get by them and likely managed to without bringing it up into the public eye on numerous occasions. But there's only so many times that you can do that before something snaps. With the crew remaining tight-lipped on the details, it's likely that anyone watching this would love to be a fly on the wall during one of Rory and Mal's conversations. But when you look at some of Rory's words in the weeks leading up to the strike, the roots of the conflict have already been revealed in a roundabout way. During an appearance on a Joe Budden Podcast Network show, See the Thing Is.
You having some problems with your friends in business, you can end the business and keep the friendship, or you can continue with it and end both. With our podcast, too. There's plenty of things where it's like, yo, you and I shouldn't even speak to each other because it's going to up the chemistry that we have.
Right.
I'm going to start feeling resentful for some other Lawyers, managers. Go talk.
With Rory's belief that external parties need to be brought in to handle these types of situations, it's conceivable that talks between representatives are happening right now. or they've already happened and neither party could get the outcome that they desired. But in light of Mal's cryptic Twitter claims that respect is non-negotiable, there's every chance that the gap between them could be widening and that communication has broken down. After all, it's not the first time that one of his co-hosts have found themselves out in the cold. To look at the most extreme outcome for Rory and Mal, and by extension the Joe Budden Podcast Network as we know it, it's crucial to look at Joe's handling of the fallout from Marissa Mendez's unceremonious exit from the pod. A staple of the podcast's initial run alongside Mal, Marissa was let go from the podcast with little notice or room for discussion. And during an appearance on Hot 97 during the promo tour for his final record, Rage and the Machine, Ebro, Rosenberg, and Mendez seized the chance to hold Joe accountable for his handling of the situation. In doing so, revealing a breakdown in communication that was defined by Joe's impulsive approach to personal relationships.
Because to be honest, I was over it anyway. But the whole fact of the matter is, as a friend and as somebody that I've worked with for years, been friends with for years, I get a text message. You don't even call me and talk to me about it.
Come on with this. I don't care. Marissa's sensitive. Peter's sensitive.
You took money out of somebody's pocket who you know is trying to pay their bills.
That's not my concern. She's an adult.
Talk about not being hip hop. That ain't hip hop. Cutting your homies' money off and like not talking about it. You're the same guy who just critiqued Drake for not being real, and here we are, we're not being real.
After years spent positioning himself as the antidote to the indifferent approach that's found in hip-hop's corporate structures, Budden's coldness towards Mendez proved that when things break down, he could be just as ruthless. And while you'd hope that Joe and his current co-host bond was solid enough that he'd act less rashly than he did back then, his co-host's remarks about his low tolerance for business getting in the way of a friendship could mean that there's no way back for them. If this proves to be the case for both Rory and Mal, it casts up a lot of questions in regards to the health of the Joe Budden Podcast Network. And when you compare the views of episodes of Girl I Guess and See the Thing Is, or at least episodes that don't feature cameos from Rory or Mal, it's clear that he doesn't have much to fall back on if the podcast has to undergo a rebuilding period, and now must hope that things can be resolved. But when you consider all of the evidence that came straight from their mouths and that of others who've been on the peripherals of Joe's world, it appears that everybody could see this coming somewhere down the road. Except perhaps for the man himself. Everyone could see it coming but Joe Budden.